I sat on the concrete steps outside Jefferson Middle School until the streetlights flickered on, watching the sky bleed from blue to purple to black. The last teacher had left 2 hours ago, her car disappearing around the corner with the apologetic wave she probably thought I couldn't see. I was 12 years old and I had finally stopped crying. My phone was dead. It had been dead since lunch when I'd frantically texted mom, then dad, then my older sister Claire. No responses before the battery gave out. The school secretary had tried calling home for me before she locked up, but no one answered. She'd offered to wait with me, but I told her my mom was on her way. I lied because I was tired of seeing pity in adult eyes. It was a Thursday in October, and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees since morning. I was wearing a thin cardigan over my uniform, and my legs were bare below my skirt. I'd been sitting there for 4 hours and 17 minutes. I knew because I'd watched every single minute tick by on the school's clock tower before the building went dark. This wasn't the first time they'd forgotten me, but as I stood up, my legs stiff and aching, my stomach hollow with hunger, something crystallized inside me. A decision, cold and sharp as the autumn air. I picked up my backpack and started walking. Our house was 6 miles away. I'd walked it once before with Claire during a charity walk, and it had taken us 2 hours. I started putting one foot in front of the other. What my family didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 months ago, I had died. It was July, right after my 12th birthday. We'd gone to the lake, the whole family, mom, dad, Claire, who was 15, and Kyle, who was 8. Claire had been on her phone the entire time, texting her boyfriend. Mom and dad were arguing about money, which they always did, their voices sharp and carrying across the water. Kyle was building sandcastles and demanding attention every 30 seconds. I had wanted to show Dad that I'd finally learned to swim to the floating dock. I'd been practicing all summer, but when I called to him, he waved me off without looking up from his argument with Mom. So I went alone. I didn't see the boat. It was a jet ski, actually, going way too fast in a no-wake zone. The driver was drunk, they said later. I remember the moment of impact, the crushing sensation in my chest, the water closing over my head, the way the light fractured above me as I sank. I remember thinking, none of them are even looking. I was dead for 4 minutes. Clinical death, no heartbeat, no brain activity. The paramedics brought me back, and when I opened my eyes on that rocky beach with strangers' faces hovering over mine, I felt different, hollow. Then the memories crashed into me. Not memories of my life, memories of a life. Another version of myself, older, making the same walk home I was making now. Alone at 15, alone at 17, alone at 23, still trying to earn scraps of attention from people who had never once chosen me. I saw myself dying in that other life, 34 years old in a hospital bed from pneumonia I'd ignored too long because I was working 3 jobs to pay off my family's debts. Debts they'd put in my name because I was the only one with good credit, the only one responsible enough, the only one stupid enough to say yes. I saw Claire's wedding, which I'd paid for, Kyle's college tuition, which I'd covered, Mom and Dad's retirement, which they expected me to fund. I saw myself giving and giving until there was nothing left. In that other life, not one of them came to my funeral. When I woke up on that beach, drowning and dying at 12, I had lived an entire lifetime of being forgotten. And I made a choice right there with lake water still burning in my lungs, never again. The doctors said my survival was a miracle. Mom cried at my hospital bedside and promised to be better, more attentive. Dad squeezed my hand and said I'd scared him. Claire brought me a stuffed animal she'd clearly grabbed from the hospital gift shop without looking at it. It was a duck with a tag that said, "Get well soon, Grandpa." Their attention lasted 3 days. By the time school started in September, we were back to the usual pattern. Claire was the golden child, beautiful and popular and cruel in the casual way teenagers are when they know they're loved, no matter what. Kyle was the baby, demanding and spoiled and somehow always forgiven. And I was the responsible one, the easy one, the one they didn't have to think about. My feet hurt. I'd been walking for 30 minutes and I was maybe a third of the way home. The street I was on had no sidewalk, just a gravel shoulder, and every time a car passed, its headlights swept over me and then away. None of them stopped. I knew what would happen when I got home. In my past life, this exact night had played out differently. I'd sat on those steps until 9 p.m., getting hypothermic, until a teacher doing late-night grading spotted me and drove me home. The school had called CPS. There had been an investigation, awkward interviews, my parents putting on a show of remorse and responsibility. Nothing came of it. It was ruled an honest mistake, a miscommunication. But my parents had been furious with me for making them look bad. The resentment had added another brick to the wall between us. This time, I wasn't waiting for rescue. This time, I was walking home under my own power, and I was never ever going to put myself in a position to be forgotten again. Because here's what I'd learned in that other life, what I'd finally understood too late. You can't make people love you. You can't earn their attention or their care. Some people are black holes. They take and take and take, and you can pour your entire life into them, and they'll still look right through you when you need them most. But you can make them regret it. Reached Oakmont Avenue and turned left. 3 more miles. My phone was still dead, heavy and useless in my pocket. In my memories of the other timeline, when I'd finally gotten home that night, driven by pitying Mrs. Chen, my English teacher, my family had been shocked to see me with her. They'd all been home. Mom had been watching TV. Dad had been in his office. Claire had been getting ready for a party. Kyle had been playing video games. Not one of them had remembered they were supposed to pick me up. Not one of them had wondered where I was. When I'd asked why they forgot, Mom had looked genuinely confused. "I thought your father was getting you." Dad had said, "I thought you were getting a ride with Claire." Claire had rolled her eyes and said, "I'm not your chauffeur, Emma. You should have texted." I had texted 7 times. This time would be different, though. This time I had an advantage my past self hadn't possessed. I knew exactly how little I mattered to them. And I knew something else, something I'd discovered in those memories of another life. Something that had been buried in a box in the attic since I was 3 years old. I had a grandmother, my mother's mother, Helen Price. And she had been trying to reach me for 9 years. In my past life, I hadn't found the letters until I was 26, when my mother finally died, and I'd had to clean out the house. Dozens of letters, birthday cards with checks, Christmas presents, all returned to sender or hidden away. My grandmother had been writing to me since I was 3, since right after the big falling out between her and my mother. I didn't know what the fight had been about. Even in my old memories, Mom had never told me. But the letters told their own story. My grandmother was wealthy, old money, the kind that compounds over generations. She'd wanted to be part of my life. She'd wanted to help. My mother had cut her off completely, returned every check, refused every call. By the time I found the letters in that other life, my grandmother had been dead for 3 years. The inheritance that should have come to my mother, that would have solved every financial problem my parents had gone to charity instead. But this time, Grandma Helen was still alive. She was 73, living in a brownstone on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which was a 3-hour drive from our suburban Pennsylvania town. And if the pattern from my past life held, there was a letter from her that had arrived 2 months ago, right after my birthday, hidden somewhere in this house. I just had to find it. A car slowed beside me. I tensed, then recognized the vehicle, Mrs. Chen's silver Honda. She rolled down the window, her face creased with concern. "Emma? Honey, what are you doing out here?" I could have gotten in the car, let her drive me home, repeat the pattern from my old life. Instead, I gave her my best reassuring smile, the one I'd perfected over years of making adults comfortable. "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen. My mom's actually just around the corner. She's at the gas station. I told her I'd walk to meet her because I needed to clear my head. Rough day, you know?" She looked uncertain. "Are you sure? It's dark and—" "Really, I promise. There's her car now." I pointed at a random sedan turning onto a side street. "Thank you so much for checking on me, though. You're the best." She watched me for another moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but be safe, okay? And Emma, if you ever need anything, you can talk to me." "I will, thank you." She drove away. I waited until her taillights disappeared, then kept walking. It took me another hour and a half to reach my neighborhood. My feet had blisters on top of blisters, and I was shaking from cold and exhaustion. But I felt clear-headed in a way I hadn't since waking up on that beach. Purpose is a powerful antidote to despair. The lights were on in my house when I arrived. Through the front window, I could see the TV flickering in the living room. I checked my watch, 9:47 p.m. I'd been gone for almost 8 hours. I walked up the driveway and opened the front door. Mom was on the couch with a glass of wine, watching some reality show. She glanced up when I entered, then did a double take. "Emma, when did you get home?" Not "where have you been?" Not "are you okay?" Just confusion about when I'd arrived, as if I'd been upstairs the whole time. "Just now," I said quietly. "Oh, well, there's leftover pizza in the fridge if you're hungry. I'm about to go to bed." She turned back to the TV. I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. She had completely forgotten. Somewhere in the chaos of her day, the fact that her 12-year-old daughter needed to be picked up from school had simply evaporated. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Working late. He texted around 7. "And Claire?" "At Madison's house. She'll be back by midnight." "And Kyle?" "In bed." She said this with the proud tone of someone who'd accomplished a difficult task. Getting an 8-year-old to bed was apparently more memorable than retrieving a 12-year-old from school. I nodded slowly. Then I climbed the stairs to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed in the dark. In my old life, this had been the moment I'd broken down crying. I'd felt so worthless, so invisible. I'd convinced myself that I must be fundamentally unlovable. I'd spent the next 22 years trying to prove my worth, trying to earn the love that should have been freely given. This time, I didn't cry. I took off my shoes, looking at the bloody blisters on my heels. I bandaged them carefully with supplies from my bathroom. Then I opened my laptop. First, I needed to find those letters from Grandma Helen. In my old life, Mom had hidden them in the attic in a box labeled holiday decorations. I'd found them by accident while looking for Christmas lights. I waited until midnight until I heard Claire come home and everyone's doors close. Then I crept to the attic stairs. The box was exactly where I remembered it. I pulled out the bundled letters, held together with a rubber band that had started to perish. There were 43 letters in total. I took them all back to my room and read them by flashlight under my covers. They were heartbreaking. Letter after letter from a grandmother who wanted to know me, who sent birthday wishes and Christmas greetings and just love. Unconditional, uncomplicated love. The checks had all been returned, but I could see the amounts written on the carbon copies she'd kept. $100 for each birthday, $200 for each Christmas, increasing as I got older. The most recent letter from this August was different. It was longer, more urgent. "My dearest Emma, you're 12 now, old enough to start understanding complicated things. I don't know if your mother has told you about me or why we don't speak. I hope someday she will, and I hope you'll understand that whatever happened between your mother and me, it had nothing to do with you. You were never at fault. I'm getting older, Emma, and I find myself thinking about legacy, about what I'll leave behind. I've been successful in business. I founded Price Industries, which your mother may have mentioned, and I've been lucky in investments. But none of that matters if I can't share it with the people I love. I know your family is struggling financially. I've kept tabs from a distance, which I hope doesn't upset you. Your father lost his job last year, and the medical bills from your mother's surgery have been mounting. I want to help, please. It's not charity, it's what family does. On your 18th birthday, a trust fund I established for you will become accessible. It's currently worth $2.3 million, but Emma, you don't have to wait until then if you need help before. If you ever want to reach out to me, my phone number and address are below. Call anytime. I'll answer. All my love, Grandma Helen." My hands were shaking as I read it. $2.3 million. In my old life, I'd never known this existed until it was too late. My mother had hidden this from me, had let us struggle and scrape by, had let me sacrifice my childhood working part-time jobs to help with bills, all while there was a safety net she'd refused to reach for because of pride or spite or whatever had caused the rift. I checked the date on the letter, August 15th, 2 months ago, my birthday. I read the letter 3 more times, memorizing every word. Then, I carefully returned all the letters to the box and crept back to the attic. I had to be smart about this. If my mother discovered I'd found them, she'd destroy them or move them or find some way to cut off this lifeline. But I'd taken photos of every single letter with my phone, which was now charging on my nightstand, and I'd memorized my grandmother's phone number. The next morning was Friday. I woke up early, got dressed, and went downstairs. Mom was making coffee, her hair still messy from sleep. "Morning, sweetie," she said absently. "Sleep well?" "Yeah," I said. "Mom, how am I getting to school today?" She blinked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how am I getting there? Bus? Are you driving me? I just want to know." She frowned. "Isn't the bus running?" "I don't take the bus, Mom. I'm too far from the route. I haven't taken the bus since elementary school." This was true. Our house was just outside the bus zone, so one of my parents was supposed to drive me daily. Her frown deepened. "Oh, right. Well, I have a hair appointment at 9, so can you get a ride with someone?" "Like who?" "I don't know. One of your friend's parents?" I didn't have friends, not really. I'd been too busy being responsible, too busy trying to keep my grades perfect and my family happy. But Mom didn't know that because she'd never asked. "Sure," I said, "I'll figure it out." I walked to school. It was 3 miles and it took me 55 minutes. I arrived on time, just barely, with fresh blisters forming on top of yesterday's. That day, I watched my family with new eyes. Not the disappointed, desperate eyes of a child seeking love, but the calculating eyes of someone who'd already lived through the worst they could do. At lunch, I sat alone in the library and used the computer to research my grandmother, Helen Price, founder and former CEO of Price Industries, a manufacturing company that supplied parts to automotive and aerospace industries. Net worth estimated at 47 million, widowed 15 years ago. One daughter, my mother, from whom she was estranged. No other children or grandchildren, which meant I was her only direct descendant. I found articles about her philanthropy, her business acumen, her elegant brownstone in Manhattan. I found an interview from 5 years ago where she'd mentioned her greatest regret, being estranged from her only grandchild. I printed everything and hid it in my locker. After school, I waited on the steps again. This time, I waited exactly 30 minutes. When it became clear no one was coming, I started walking. I didn't call, I didn't text, I just walked. It took me 2 hours to get home. When I arrived, Dad was in the driveway washing his car. He looked up when I walked past. "Hey, Emma, good day at school?" "Yeah," I said. "Where's your mom? I thought she was picking you up." "She had a hair appointment." "Oh, right. So how'd you get home?" "Walked." He blinked. "All the way from school? That's pretty far, isn't it?" 6 miles. "Huh." He turned back to his car and well, good exercise, I guess. I went inside, made myself a sandwich, did my homework. No one asked where I'd been or how I'd gotten home. This became my routine. Every day, I walked to school and walked home. My legs grew stronger, my blisters turned to calluses. I started timing my routes, finding shortcuts. I lost weight I didn't have to lose, my clothes hanging loose, on my frame. It took 2 weeks before anyone noticed. It was a teacher, inevitably. Mrs. Chen, during English class, kept me after the bell. "Emma, I've been meaning to ask, are you doing okay? I've seen you walking home several times and it's getting cold. Is everything all right with your parents?" I smiled at her, calm and composed. "Everything's fine. I like walking. It gives me time to think." "But it's so far, and it's starting to get dark earlier and—" "Really, Miss Chen, I appreciate your concern, but I'm okay. My parents know I walk. It's actually my mom's idea. She thinks I need more exercise and independence." The lie came easily. She looked uncertain but nodded. "All right, but if you ever need help, please ask." "I will." I wouldn't. At home, the invisibility continued. Mom asked me to watch Kyle after school so she could go to book club. Dad asked me to make dinner because he was tired. Claire asked me to do her laundry because she was busy studying, though I saw her on FaceTime with her boyfriend for 3 hours that evening. I said yes to everything. I was pleasant and helpful and utterly unremarkable. I did my homework, got straight A's, kept my room clean, and caused zero problems. And every night, after everyone went to bed, I planned. The trust fund I couldn't touch until I was 18. But my grandmother, she'd offered help anytime. The question was how to contact her without my mother knowing. I couldn't use the house phone. The records would show up on the bill. I couldn't use my cell phone for the same reason. My parents monitored the account. I needed a clean line of communication. 3 weeks after the first forgotten pickup, I had saved $42 from lunch money I hadn't spent. I'd been bringing sandwiches from home instead of buying cafeteria food. I was hungry all the time, but it was worth it. I used the money to buy a burner phone from a convenience store on my walk home from school. The clerk barely looked at me. I activated it using the free Wi-Fi from the library. That night, at 11 p.m., when the house was silent, I sat on my bedroom floor with the burner phone and my grandmother's letter. My hands were shaking. This was it, the moment that would change everything. I dialed the number. It rang twice before a clear, strong voice answered. Hello? Grandma Helen? My voice came out as a whisper. There was a sharp intake of breath. Emma, is that you? Yes. Oh my God, oh my darling girl, how I've wanted to hear your voice for so long. Are you okay? Are you safe? The concern in her voice, the immediate worry for my well-being, made something crack in my chest. I'd been holding myself together so tightly, being so strategic and cold, and suddenly I was 12 years old and someone cared that I was okay. I'm safe, I managed. I found your letters. Mom hid them, but I found them. Of course she did. There was bitterness there, but also resignation. Emma, sweetheart, tell me everything. Are you really all right? So I did. I told her about the forgotten pickups, the daily walks, the way I'd become invisible in my own home. I didn't tell her about the drowning or the memories of another life. That would sound insane. But I told her enough. She was silent for a long moment after I finished. I'm going to fix this, she said finally. Her voice was hard as steel. Emma, I'm going to fix all of this, but I need you to trust me and be patient. Can you do that? Yes. Good. First, keep this phone charged and on you always, but hidden. Call me anytime you need to. Second, don't let your mother know we're in contact, not yet. Third, how are your grades? Straight A's. Good girl. Keep them that way. I'm going to make some arrangements. It might take a few weeks, possibly a month or two. Can you hold on that long? I've held on this long. That's my girl. Her voice softened. Emma, I love you. I have always loved you. And I promise you, things are going to change. We talked for another hour. She told me about her life, asked about mine. She asked about my interests, my favorite books, what I wanted to be when I grew up. Normal grandmother questions that I'd never gotten to answer before. When we finally hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years, in both lives. The next 6 weeks were the longest of my life. I continued my routine, walking to school, walking home, being invisible. But now I had a secret warmth inside me, a knowledge that someone was on my side. Grandma Helen and I talked every few nights. She was careful, coaching me to call only when I was certain no one could overhear. She asked detailed questions about my parents' finances, my mother's daily schedule, even the layout of our house. I answered everything. In the 5th week, she told me what she'd been working on. I've hired investigators, she said, private detectives who've been documenting your situation. The walks to and from school, the neglect. I have dozens of photographs now, Emma, time-stamped and dated. I also have records of every letter I've sent that your mother returned, every check she refused to cash that could have helped your family. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to get custody of you. My breath caught. You can do that? I'm certainly going to try. I've retained the best family lawyer in New York. We're building a case for neglect and emotional abuse. The photographs alone are damning. A 12-year-old walking 6 miles to and from school in increasingly cold weather while her parents are home. That's textbook neglect. But they'll say it's a misunderstanding. that they didn't know. Let them try. I have phone records showing you've never called them for pickup, text records showing you stopped trying, your mother's calendar showing she's been home during pickup times, your father's work schedule showing the same. Ignorance isn't a defense when it's willful. I was quiet, thinking. In my old life, the CPS investigation had gone nowhere because my parents had been able to frame it as a one-time mistake, a miscommunication. They'd promised to do better, and CPS had closed the case. But this was different. This wasn't a single incident. It was a pattern, documented over weeks. And it wasn't being reported by a concerned teacher, which my parents could dismiss. This was being pushed by a wealthy, determined grandmother with unlimited resources and a personal vendetta. When? I asked. Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. What? Start keeping a journal. Write down every instance of neglect, every time you're forgotten, every time you're made to feel invisible. Date it, time it, be specific. It'll help our case. So I did. I bought a composition notebook with some of my saved lunch money and started documenting everything. October 29th. Walked to school, 6 miles, 1 chai, 15 minutes. No one noticed I'd left early to make it on time. Walked home, 6 miles, 1 char, 30 minutes. Mom asked me to babysit Kyle so she could go to yoga. No dinner prepared, made sandwiches for Kyle and myself. Parents went out to dinner together. October 30th. Walked to and from school. Claire asked to borrow my lunch money for food with friends. I said no. She took it anyway from my backpack, went hungry. When I told Mom, she said I should share with my sister. November 2nd. Walked to and from school in rain. Arrived home soaked. No one noticed. Developed fever by evening. Asked Mom for cold medicine. She told me to check the bathroom cabinet myself. November 5th. Parent-teacher conferences. Mom missed mine because Claire's ran long and Mom forgot I had one after. Mrs. Chen waited 30 minutes. Called home, no answer. Conference rescheduled. The journal grew, page after page of documentation. And Grandma Helen was right. Seeing it written out, the pattern was undeniable. Meanwhile, at school, I started making small changes. I joined the school newspaper, knowing it would look good for the custody case. I volunteered at the library. I made myself visible in all the ways my family refused to see me. And I waited. The call came on a Tuesday in mid-November. I was walking home from school, the cold wind cutting through my thin jacket when my burner phone rang. Emma, it's time, Grandma Helen said. I've filed for emergency custody. The hearing is tomorrow at 2 p.m. A social worker will be coming to interview you at school tomorrow morning at 10. Tell them the truth, all of it. Can you do that? Yes. Your mother is about to be served with papers. She's going to be furious. She's going to try to coach you to make you lie or recant. Don't. Stay strong. Can you do that? I can. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. This is almost over. I was 3 miles from home when my regular phone started ringing. Mom, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then again. Then texts started flooding in. Where are you? Call me now. What have you done? Get home immediately. I kept walking at my same steady pace. I didn't hurry. I didn't slow down. I just walked, watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic messages. When I finally arrived home, Mom's car was in the driveway at an angle, like she'd parked in a rush. I walked through the front door to find her standing in the living room, papers clutched in her hand, her face purple with rage. What the fuck did you do? She screamed. Dad emerged from his office, looking confused. Catherine, what's going on? Your daughter, she spat the word like it was poison, has been talking to my mother behind my back, and now the bitch is trying to take her away. I stood very still, very calm. Dad looked at me. Emma, is this true? Yes. How? When? Mom was nearly incoherent. How did you even contact her? I found your letters, the ones you hid from me. Her face went white, then red again. You were snooping through my things? They were letters to me with my name on them. You stole them. I was protecting you. She's a manipulative, controlling. She's trying to get custody of me, I interrupted, because you forgot to pick me up from school for hours. And I've been walking 12 miles a day for 6 weeks, and you never even noticed. That's not. We didn't. Dad was floundering. Emma, come on, that's not fair. We've been busy, but when's my birthday? I asked. He blinked. What? When is my birthday, Dad? Silence. What's my favorite color? What's my best friend's name? What grade am I in? What teacher do I have for English? More silence. You don't know, I said quietly. You don't know anything about me because you don't care. And now Grandma Helen is going to prove it in court. Mom lunged at me. Dad caught her, holding her back as she screamed. You ungrateful little bitch! After everything we've done for you, we've fed you, clothed you, given you a home. You've ignored me, I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart was racing. You've forgotten me. You've made me invisible. And now everyone's going to see it. I walked upstairs to my room and locked the door. Behind me, I could hear Mom's screaming continue, Dad's voice trying to calm her down, Claire's door opening as she asked what was happening. I sat on my bed and pulled out my journal. Final entry, November 14th. Told my family the truth. They're angry that I contacted Grandma Helen. Not sorry for forgetting me. Not concerned about my 6 weeks of walking. Just angry they got caught. The next morning, a social worker named Ms. Rodriguez came to school to interview me. She was kind, professional, and thorough. I showed her my journal. I showed her my feet, where the calluses had formed. I told her everything. She asked if I felt safe at home. I said I felt forgotten, which was worse. The hearing that afternoon was held in family court. Grandma Helen's lawyer had advised that I didn't need to be there, that the evidence would speak for itself. But I asked to come anyway. I wanted to see it. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. My parents sat on one side with their hastily retained lawyer, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers. Grandma Helen sat on the other side with her attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in an immaculate suit who looked like she ate negligent parents for breakfast. I sat in the gallery with a court advocate watching. The hearing took 3 hours. Grandma Helen's lawyer presented everything. The photographs of me walking to school in increasingly cold weather, time-stamped over 6 weeks. The phone records showing I'd stopped calling my parents for pickup. The text messages I'd sent that went unanswered. The returned letters, the refused checks, my journal, which the judge read with an increasingly stern expression. My parents' lawyer tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, that my parents had assumed I was getting rides with friends, that they'd been dealing with financial stress. Your Honor, Grandma Helen's lawyer said, her voice cutting through the excuses. If it please the court, I'd like to note that the respondents' claimed financial stress was entirely alleviated by Mrs. Price's repeated offers of assistance, which were refused. Furthermore, their claim that they believed Emma was receiving rides from friends falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. Emma has no friends. She eats lunch alone every day. She's never been invited to a sleepover or birthday party. Her parents would know this if they'd ever asked about her life. The judge looked at my parents. Is this true? Does your daughter have friends at school? My mother hesitated too long. I'm not sure of the names. Does she have any friends? The judge pressed. She's shy, Mom said defensively. She doesn't tell us things. Because you don't ask, the judge said flatly. She called my parents to the stand one by one, asked them basic questions about me. My birthday, Mom got the day right, but the year wrong, making me a year younger than I was. My favorite food, Dad guessed pizza, it was strawberries. My best subject, Mom said math, it was English. Whether I had any allergies, they both said no. I'm allergic to shellfish and had been since I was 4. It was devastating. Not because they were malicious, but because they genuinely didn't know. Years of not paying attention had added up to complete ignorance of who I was. The judge called me to the stand, asked me how I felt about my parents. I thought about lying, about saying I loved them, that I wanted to stay. But in my old life, I'd spent decades lying for them, covering for them, pretending we were a happy family. I don't think they're bad people, I said carefully. I just don't think they see me. And I can't live somewhere I'm invisible. Do you want to live with your grandmother? Yes. Have you ever met her before? No, but she's been writing to me for 9 years and my parents hid the letters. She's been trying to be part of my life. That's more than I can say for the people who see me every day. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked my grandmother to approach the stand. Grandma Helen was elegant and composed. She testified about the rift with my mother, a disagreement over Grandma's second marriage after my grandfather died, which my mother had deemed disrespectful and used as an excuse to cut contact. She testified about her repeated attempts to maintain a relationship with me. The letters, the calls, the money, all refused. "Why do you want custody now?" the judge asked. "Because I'm 73 years old, Your Honor, and I've wasted 9 years I could have spent knowing my granddaughter. Because that child has been walking 12 miles a day in the cold and her parents haven't noticed. Because she deserves to be someone's priority, and I'm volunteering for the job." The judge took a recess to review the evidence. When she returned, her decision was swift. "I'm granting temporary custody to Ms. Helen Price pending a full investigation. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, you will undergo parenting classes and family therapy. Emma will have supervised visitation with you if she chooses. We'll reconvene in 3 months to determine permanent custody arrangements." My mother screamed, actually screamed in the courtroom that this was insane, that her mother was manipulating everyone, that I was an ungrateful liar. The judge held her in contempt, threatened her with jail time if she didn't compose herself. I walked out of that courtroom holding my grandmother's hand. I was 12 years old, and for the first time in my life, in both my lives, someone had chosen me. The next 3 months were transformative. Grandma Helen's brownstone in Manhattan was like something from a magazine, all hardwood floors and tall windows and rooms filled with books. She enrolled me in a private school 3 blocks away, where the classes were small and the teachers actually learned my name. She took me shopping for new clothes, took me to a doctor who was horrified by my weight loss and the state of my feet, took me to a therapist who let me talk about feeling invisible without trying to make excuses for my parents. Most importantly, she just paid attention. She asked about my day and listened to the answer. She noticed when I was sad or tired or hungry. She showed up to every school event. She was there. My parents called twice in those 3 months. Twice. Both times to argue with Grandma Helen about the custody arrangement, not to talk to me. Claire called once to tell me I'd ruined the family. Kyle never called at all. The final custody hearing was in February. This time, it was even shorter. My parents had completed 2 of their required parenting classes and attended 1 family therapy session, which the therapist reported had consisted mostly of them blaming me for their problems. The judge made the custody permanent. Grandma Helen was now my legal guardian. My parents were given visitation rights, 1 weekend a month, supervised. I declined to exercise them. The judge said that was my right. As we left the courthouse, my mother tried one last time to talk to me. She grabbed my arm, her eyes desperate. "Emma, please, I'm your mother. You can't just throw away our family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing but pity. "You threw me away first," I said quietly. "You just forgot you'd done it." 4 years later, I was 16 and had just finished my junior year at Brearley, one of the most prestigious prep schools in New York. I had friends, real friends, who invited me to things and remembered my birthday. I had straight A's and a near-perfect SAT score. I had college scouts looking at me, interested in my essay about overcoming childhood neglect. I also had a trust fund that I could now access with Grandma Helen's permission. $2.3 million, which had grown to nearly $3 million with good investments. And I had a plan. Because here's what I'd learned. My parents hadn't just hidden Grandma Helen's letters. They'd also taken out credit cards in my name when I was 8 years old. I'd discovered it during the custody proceedings when Grandma Helen had run a background check on my parents and found my credit was destroyed before I'd even become a teenager. In my old life, I hadn't discovered this until I was 25, trying to get my first apartment. The debt had been crippling, over $50,000 across multiple cards. My parents had ruined my financial future before I was old enough to understand what credit was. This time, I'd found out early. And with Grandma Helen's help, I'd been building a case. On my 16th birthday, we filed a lawsuit. Identity theft, fraud, financial abuse. The amount we sued for was enough to get their attention. The full amount of the debt plus damages, nearly $200,000. My parents tried to settle quietly, offered to pay back the credit cards if we dropped the suit. But I'd learned from Grandma Helen that sometimes the point isn't money, it's accountability. We went to court. The evidence was overwhelming. My signature on the credit card applications, forged when I was 8, the spending patterns, charges at stores I'd never been to for things I'd never owned. My parents had treated my identity like a blank check, assuming they'd never have to answer for it. The judge ruled in my favor, ordered them to pay restitution plus damages, nearly $300,000. They didn't have it. Their house was mortgaged to the hilt, Dad's business had failed, and Mom's spending habits had destroyed their savings. They filed for bankruptcy within a month. I could have felt guilty. In my old life, I would have. I would have forgiven them, helped them, sacrificed myself to save them from the consequences of their actions. This time, I felt only satisfaction, because the bankruptcy meant they had to sell the house they'd raised 3 children in, where Claire had her perfect Instagram-ready bedroom and Kyle had his gaming setup. The house where I'd been forgotten in every room. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Claire, now 19 and in community college, had to get a job to help with rent. Kyle, 12 now, suddenly had to share a room with his father. And they blamed me. Of course they blamed me. But here's the thing, I didn't care. I had dinner with Grandma Helen every night. We talked about everything, my classes, my future, her past. She told me stories about building Price Industries from the ground up, about being a woman in manufacturing in the 1970s, about the mistakes she'd made and the wisdom she'd earned. You know, she said one night over her famous roast chicken, your mother thinks I stole you from her. She's called me sobbing more than once, saying I turned you against the family. What do you tell her? That I didn't have to turn you against anything. She did that herself. Grandma Helen set down her fork, looking at me seriously. Emma, I want you to understand something. What you did, standing up for yourself, demanding better, that wasn't cruel. That was survival. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for saving yourself. I don't, I said honestly. Not anymore. And I didn't. Because I'd lived the alternative. I'd lived the life where I stayed silent, where I accepted the crumbs they offered and called it love. I'd lived the life where I sacrificed everything, and they'd let me. This time, I'd chosen myself. Senior year, I got into Yale. Full scholarship, though I didn't need it. Grandma Helen cried when I told her, actual tears of pride and joy. My parents sent a card. Just a card, not even a gift. Congratulations on Yale, we always knew you were smart. It was signed by my mother. My father hadn't even added his name. I threw it away. At graduation, Grandma Helen sat in the front row, beaming. She'd invited my parents because the court order required her to inform them of major events. They didn't come. Claire sent a text saying she had to work. Kyle didn't respond. I gave my valedictorian speech about invisible children, kids who are physically present in their families but emotionally abandoned, kids who learn to make themselves smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the space their families are willing to give them, kids who deserve better. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Grandma Helen was crying again. That summer, before Yale, I did something I'd been planning for months. I started a foundation, the Emma Price Foundation for Forgotten Children, funded with $1 million from my trust fund. Its mission? To identify and support children suffering from emotional neglect and family invisibility, to provide therapy, legal advocacy, and emergency housing for kids who, like me, had learned that being invisible was safer than demanding attention. The foundation's first action was funding a lawsuit against the local school district, questioning why it took a private investigator to document what my teachers must have seen every day, a 12-year-old walking alone to school in increasingly dangerous conditions. The school settled, implemented new policies for checking on students' transportation, mandatory reporting for suspected neglect, better training for teachers to spot emotional abuse. My parents were furious, claimed I was dragging the family name through the mud. But here's the thing. The family name was Hayes. I'd legally changed mine to Price when Grandma Helen adopted me. Their name had nothing to do with me anymore. At Yale, I majored in social work and child advocacy. I spent my summers interning at children's services agencies, learning the systems that had failed me and thousands like me. I wrote papers on emotional neglect on the invisible children in supposedly functional families, and I kept in touch with Grandma Helen every single day, called her every night before bed, visited every other weekend. She came to my college events, met my roommates, sent care packages with handwritten notes. She showed me what family was supposed to be. My sophomore year, my father tried to reach out. A long email about how he was sorry, how he'd been dealing with depression and work stress, how he'd failed me but wanted to make amends. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Because here's what I'd learned. Apologies don't undo damage. They don't give you back the years they stole, the security they denied, the love they withheld. And when someone shows you who they are, repeatedly, consistently, over years, you should believe them. He tried twice more, then gave up. Mom never apologized at all. She still maintained she'd done nothing wrong, that I'd been turned against her by a manipulative rich woman who'd stolen her daughter. She posted about it on Facebook sometimes, vague posts about ungrateful children and broken families that her friends sympathized with because they didn't know the real story. I blocked her after the third one. I didn't need that poison in my life. Claire got engaged to her college boyfriend when I was 20. She sent me an invitation to the wedding. Not a personal call, not an attempt to rebuild a relationship, just a formal invitation, probably because Mom told her she had to. I sent a card declining. No gift, just unable to attend. She called me after that, the first time we'd spoken in 8 years. "You're really not coming?" she asked. She sounded genuinely surprised. "No. Emma, I'm your sister." "You were my sister. You haven't acted like it since I was 12. "That's not fair. I was a teenager." "You were old enough to know I was walking 12 miles a day and never asked. Why? You were old enough to see me going hungry and take my lunch money anyway. You were old enough to choose, Claire, and you chose to look away." Silence. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's worth acknowledging," I said. "But it's not worth reconciliation. I hope your wedding is beautiful. I hope your marriage is happy, but I hope those things from a distance." I hung up. Kyle tried to friend me on Facebook when he was 18. I ignored the request. I graduated from Yale summa cum laude. Grandma Helen threw me a party at a restaurant in Manhattan, invited my friends and professors. It was one of the happiest nights of my life. My parents weren't there, but I hadn't expected them to be. After graduation, I went to law school, specialized in family law, custody cases, children's advocacy. Grandma Helen helped me understand the legal side of Price Industries, and together we restructured the foundation to be more effective, more aggressive in pursuing justice for invisible children. We've helped hundreds of kids so far, some as young as 6, some as old as 17. Kids whose parents forgot them, ignored them, used them. Kids who thought they were unlovable because the people who should have loved them most didn't. We give them therapy, legal representation, sometimes new homes. Always the message: you are not invisible. You matter. You deserve better. I'm 25 now, the age I was in my other life when I found Grandma Helen's letters and learned it was too late. This time, everything is different. I'm a practicing attorney specializing in child custody and neglect cases. I live in an apartment 2 blocks from Grandma Helen's brownstone. I have friends, a boyfriend who thinks I hung the moon, a career I'm passionate about, and I have a grandmother who never misses a birthday, who calls just to talk, who tells me she loves me every single day. Last month, I got a call from a social worker about a case, a 13-year-old girl who'd been walking to school for months, whose parents claimed they thought she was getting rides from friends, who'd learned to make herself so small and quiet that her family forgot she existed. I took the case pro bono, because I know exactly how this story goes. I've lived it, and this time, I'm the one who gets to rewrite the ending. My family, if you can call them that, is a cautionary tale now. My mother works retail, bitter and angry at the world. My father drives for a rideshare company, too proud to ask his wealthy daughter for help. Claire is married with a baby, struggling in a way that makes me think maybe she's finally learning what responsibility feels like. Kyle is in college somewhere, on loans he'll be paying off for years. They made their choices, they live with them, and me? I chose myself. I chose the grandmother who fought for me. I chose a life where I'm visible, valued, loved. Sometimes at night, I think about that walk home from school. 12 years old, 6 miles in the cold, completely alone. I think about how small I felt, how invisible, and then I think about everything that came after. The fight, the victory, the life I built from the ashes of their neglect. That walk was the best thing that ever happened to me because it taught me that I could survive alone, that I didn't need their love or attention to be whole, that sometimes the family you find is worth more than the one you were born to. I was forgotten, and then I chose to never be forgotten again. That's not a tragedy, that's a triumph. Last week, I got a letter from my mother. First contact in 3 years. She's sick, she says. Nothing terminal, but serious. She wants to reconcile. Says she's been in therapy, that she understands now what she did wrong. Says she's sorry. I read the letter sitting in Grandma Helen's kitchen, drinking coffee from the mug she keeps for me. The one that says, "Best granddaughter ever." "What are you going to do?" Grandma Helen asks. I look at this woman who fought for me, who chose me, who showed me what love actually looks like, who's 81 now, still sharp as ever, still my fiercest advocate. Nothing, I say. I'm going to do nothing. Because some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Some endings are better left final. I fold the letter and throw it away. Then I pour Grandma Helen more coffee and we talk about the Foundation's next case and the weather and what we should have for dinner. We talk about life, our life, the one we chose, and that, I think, is the real ending. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just peace. Just choosing every day to surround myself with people who see me, value me, choose me back. They forgot to pick me up from school for hours. I walked home and never asked again, and that walk led me here, to love, to purpose, to myself. Sometimes the greatest revenge is just living well. Being happy, proving that you never needed them in the first place. That's my story. That's my triumph. And I wouldn't change a single step of that long walk home.